welcome to the Flatten Your Fear Summit. This is all about getting past the fears, the things that hold you back from your purpose. And I have the honor to bring to you today an amazing woman with an incredible story and life to tell that will help you. Her name is Brenda Tracy. Brenda, welcome to the summit.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Well, I'm honored you said yes. You tell your story a lot out there, which I commend you for, but there's so much more to it that I want you to be able to share today. We want to help people understand how fear can stop them. We want to help people understand how to get past, make the choices to get past the fear, to walk into purpose, how to use those things that have happened to us for a greater good.
Mm-hmm.
And there's so much that you can share. So let's get started. Tell people what it is that brought you to the point of what you're doing now. Some people may not know your story. So let's start to share with them what your background is and what's happened to you to bring you to where you are today.
Yeah, so I think first I just want to kind of put a disclaimer out there that I am a rape survivor. We're going to be talking about sexual violence throughout this interview. So some people, I just want them to be aware in case this is difficult for them or they're somewhere they feel like they don't want to watch this or something. But I am a rape survivor. I am a childhood sex abuse survivor. And then in my early 20s, I was gang raped by 4 college football players. So I've dealt with a lot of trauma in my life around many different things. But, you know, for me, I think the tipping point was my gang rape. Sure. And I think for the 16 years after my gang rape, I dealt with so many mental health issues, depression, PTSD, suicidal ideation. And I just kind of had this feeling like I would just kind of wake up every day and I wanted to die. Yeah. And living life was hard, right? You went through the motions and you did things, but there was no joy. There was no real happiness. And I was living a double life, which I think a lot of people relate to that. So on the outside, you know, I became a registered nurse. I was making a lot of money. I was raising my sons. I looked like, you know, a success story, right? Yeah. I was a bright, shiny, happy person.
Yeah.
But in my personal life, I was struggling. I mean, I was suicidal. And so when I turned 40, I just kind of had this moment where I was like, is this what you're going to do for the rest of your life? You're going to live a double life and you're going to just wake up every day kind of wanting to die. Yeah. And I didn't want that. And so I started going to counseling. And as I was going to counseling, we started talking about what happened to me in Corvallis at Oregon State. And then through this crazy series of events, I ended up getting connected to a reporter. And he said, you know, I'd love to share your story. I think you could help someone. Right. And at the time, I didn't think I had a story. At the time, I didn't think anybody would care. And I actually said to him, I said, what story? Like, what? Nobody cared then when it happened to me. Why would they care?
Why now? Yeah.
Yeah. And he said, no, I think you could help someone. And I was like, fine, put my name and my face on it. And so I did that. It was in 2014. And my story went public about my gang rape at Oregon State. And it was a highly transformational moment for me in my life. But full of fear.
Oh
like,
my gosh.
This is before Me Too. This is before a lot of people are coming forward. You know, and the coach back then in 1998, because I went to the police, I got a rape kit, I did all that stuff. He gave the players a 1-game suspension. And he was actually the coach. He was actually the coach that was there again in 2014 when I came forward. So I was speaking out about, you know, a Pac-12 coach that was currently coaching. Yeah. So yeah, it was very, very scary, but that moment changed my life forever. And crazy things have happened since then.
Unbelievable things. I mean, a lot of fear, but the stage that you've been given, and we're going to get to what it brought you to in a moment, because it's tremendous what you've been able to do. And I know that you will never know how many people's lives you touch, because it's impossible for you to know that. But let's get to the stage in a minute. I want you to go back kind of in the genesis of this, because it's pretty remarkable in a horrible way that you had this repeated abuse. And there are many people, unfortunately, listening who can relate to some of the childhood abuse. And let's go to that. What does that set up for you in your mind as a child? What kind of fears enter you? What kind of self-talk enters you? What are you struggling with mentally when you've been a survivor of that kind of abuse, even before the gang rape?
Yeah. So I think for me, fear has always been a part of my life, always. And I think that most likely started, I think that my childhood sex abuse probably started around the age of 2, probably went until I was about 5. It was a family member. But I can always remember being scared of the dark, scared of people, scared of like, I can remember as a child, like I would flush the toilet and run because I was scared of the noise.
Wow.
You
Like
know,
you'd be sucked in or something, right?
yeah, had to have a nightlight on all the time.
Yeah.
I slept with the covers over my head. You know, I felt like if all of my body was in under the covers, then I couldn't be hurt.
Right.
So there's all these coping mechanisms and things that I did. And then also I think for, children survivors, you're really alone because you're dependent on your family.
Mm.
And the betrayal of someone that
Yeah.
that they would do that to you. You can't comprehend and understand it as a child, but
Right.
it does write on the wall of your life, and
Sure.
it does change you forever. But I also was not only riddled with fear my entire life. I mean, I didn't sleep with the light off until I was like 40.
Oh my gosh,
I
Brenda.
I was I remember the exact day, actually, after sharing my story about my gang rape, that I was at the door. My bed was across the room. I remember the exact day when I turned off the light and it was completely dark, and I walked across the room to my bed without feeling panicked,
Wow.
like somebody was chasing me. You know what I mean? Like somebody's gonna grab me in
Wow.
the dark or something. And I was 40.
40.
Yeah. But also shame. I was riddled
Mm.
with fear and shame my entire life. And so I just always felt like the things that happened to me, like somehow I deserved it.
Mm.
Like I wasn't good enough to, I wasn't worthy of love. I wasn't worthy of respect. I wasn't like everyone else. There was something innately wrong with me.
Mm.
Um, I was damaged. I was broken. And the things that happened to me, through these other assaults just kind of validated,
Reinforced it.
reinforced it that something was wrong with me. And so I did things like, I found my self-worth in my body, right? And a
Mm.
lot of women do that.
Right.
If a man is attracted to me, that means I have value. Not for my brains, not for, who I am as a person, but the way my body looks like. And that morphed into eating stuff. And,
Yeah.
I have a kind of I don't know, I'm not really anorexic or bulimic, but I have, what I would call an eating disorder.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people struggle with food. So yeah, it morphed into a lot of stuff, but a lot of fear and a lot of shame, I would
Yeah.
say, is probably the two constant dysfunctional cousins in my life.
Yeah, the constant companions, and they affected your choices. I think that's one thing that, you're at the time now, you're not really getting healing, right? There isn't an intervention
Right.
of any significance. And so as a child, you're just absorbing this and it's affecting your choices.
Absolutely.
And so how did that look for you as you were growing up, and then you're in high school, and then what did you do after high school? How did it affect the choices that you made?
Well, I think that when you are ran by when fear and shame are your parents, when that's your mom and your dad,
Yeah. Yeah.
you do what they say,
Mm.
right? So you don't want people to know what happened to you. You don't you make all your decisions based out of fear and shame. And so there's a lot of different things, choices that I made that I probably shouldn't have made. When I had my first son when I was 18, I was young. And that relationship with his father was full of domestic violence.
Mm.
And, I look back now and I think, of course I made that decision, right? Of course I didn't think that I was worthy of
Right.
love or respect. And so of course I don't want to say put myself, but of course I was in a relationship that validated how I felt about myself.
Yeah.
Like I don't deserve monogamy. I don't deserve to be treated well.
Right.
I don't deserve any of that stuff. I did seek out and stay with a person that I felt validated what I felt about myself.
Right.
And I don't want to say I put myself in that situation, but I think that we have to, as I'm healing today, I think about those things, right? And I think about, I'm single right now, but when I think about the idea of choosing a man, I realize that I first have to heal myself
Yes.
before I can even accept or receive
Correct.
a man that will treat me well.
Right.
Because if I'm not okay with myself and I still think that I deserve to be cheated on, lied to, hit, whatever, then that's the man I'm going to bring into my life to validate how I feel about myself.
Right. And that's a behavior you're going to put up with, right? That's the behavior you will accept on some level just because.
Absolutely. And sometimes not even understanding that you're doing it. Right. I mean, there's part of it too, where you just kind of give up on life. This is the card you were dealt. This was the hand you were dealt. It's not going to get any better. I'm not, I'm not built for greatness. Of course not me. Right. I mean, there is all that kind of stuff too. And I definitely think there was different times in life where I kind of gave up. But one thing about me too, though, was that I was really driven.
Yeah.
I went to nursing. I was a single mom, 2 sons. And I got myself through nursing school. I got a bachelor's and I have a master's in business and healthcare management.
Wow.
And so I was really driven, but it was the shame and the fear that drove me. Not that nursing wasn't my purpose. I loved nursing. It was a great calling for my life, but I felt like I needed to put all those letters behind my name.
Right.
To prove my worth.
Right.
That I deserve to be on this earth just like you, taking up the same air. Because I didn't feel like I deserved to be here. And I had to prove myself that, yes, I deserve to be here. I'm valuable, I'm worthy. And I did that by accomplishing things and putting lots of letters behind my name, which cost a lot of money.
Yeah, that costs a lot of money. But I think you're not alone from this standpoint. When people don't feel purpose, when they don't feel hope, when they don't feel value, but yet they are driven, because it's interesting, even though you were dealing with all that shame and fear, you still have probably that type A personality that said, well, just go do something. You're going to do something. I'm going to just will myself to do something, but you're not feeling purposeful. Right. And so that's a loss of hope, and even in your future. I mean, you're doing all that. Are you even feeling fulfillment from that?
I did for nursing. I will say that what happened with nursing was kind of a divine intervention for me. I don't think that I needed to do as much school as I did.
Yeah.
But I think when I went to go get my rape kit in 1998 after my assault, when I went to the hospital to get my rape kit, I had decided on the way to the hospital I was going to kill myself. But I was with my mom in our car, and I'd made that decision on the way to the hospital. And so I thought, I'm just going to go to the hospital and get this rape kit done. And when I'm home and I'm by myself, I'm going to take my life. Wow. But when I got there, I met my nurse, and she was a sexual assault response team nurse. Her name was Jenny. And, I thought when I met Jenny, I thought that she was going to think I was gross. I thought that she would, because what happened to me was gross.
Judge you. Right.
But I'm not gross, but I felt like I was.
Sure.
And I thought that she would judge me. And I thought it was going to be really uncomfortable and terrible, but I thought, just get through it. But when I got there, that wasn't how it was with her. She just exuded this compassion and this love I had never really felt with another person. And I didn't really understand it, because here's this stranger in like the worst moment of my life.
Yeah.
But she inspired me to become a nurse, actually. There was kind of a movement of God there in my life. And, I started school 2 months after that rape kit.
Wow.
So I became a registered nurse, and I felt like, for that season, that was my calling, and I did feel purpose in doing that. But also, like you said, you get all the accolades and you're doing a good job in your profession, but then at home, you're not okay. And I guess I thought that if I could fulfill myself with, nursing and working, and I was a workaholic, and people patting you on the back and awards and whatever else, and somehow it would fix me, and it just never did. Right. You just fill that black hole.
Right.
It just never, it's unending, because the work is with you. It's within you.
Yep. You've got to do the work. You said something really amazing to me. You said about fear, you said it can either protect or prevent.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And I loved that, because that's your view of it. It was I'm like, oh my gosh, that's awesome. It's so simple. Dive into that a little bit.
Yeah. So I really learned that after stepping forward with my story, because I was so scared to step forward with my story. And then I also met the coach who gave the men a 1-game suspension, Coach Riley. I met him at Nebraska when he was coaching there. And that was a really terrifying moment in my life too. But what I learned is that the most terrifying moments in my life have actually also brought the most profound healing and profound change in my life. And so what I realized was that there was fear that protects you, like, the hair stand up on the back of your neck. And you hear people say, like, well, I felt weird about getting on the elevator, but I didn't want to be rude, right? And then there's the fear that prevents you. It's fear that's lying to you.
That's right.
You feel it. I'm not saying
Yep.
you don't feel it, but if you could step out and confront that fear and do it afraid, there could be something really amazing on the other side for you.
Yes.
And there's many things that I could have said, no, I'm not going to share my story.
Right.
People aren't going to believe me. There's going to be backlash. Maybe I'm going to get sued. Maybe, whatever it could be. Lot of things to be scared of. But I did it anyways. I did it afraid, and it ended up being one of the most magnificent moments of my life.
Life-changing moment. And part of that was your choice to be vulnerable. Let's talk about vulnerability and what you've learned about that as well.
Well, I think vulnerability is my power. I share my story. I never intended to be a public speaker. I want to say that first. But what happened was I had come forward with my story, and the coach in my story, who had given my rapist a 1-game suspension, he invited me to Nebraska to meet him and talk to his football team. And so I stood in front of him and his 120 football players, all guys, strangers, and talked to them about what happened to me that night and about my journey in my life. And I was as vulnerable as I could be or had ever been in my life. And it was terrifying, and it was gut wrenching, and I was crying, and other people were crying, and I was so scared. But I did it. And then it was a really amazing moment. And then other schools started calling me and saying, could you come please share your story? So I literally stand in front of a room full of strangers, and I talk about the very worst moment of my life, the most shameful, embarrassing, hard, traumatic moment of my life. And I rip open that wound for people so they can see who I am, who survivors are, what we go through,
right?
All of these things. And so, I'm very vulnerable. But what I found too is that in being vulnerable, I think that that's the powerful part of who I am and how I share my story. I mean, I've had people come to me and say, and mind you, I've never taken any classes. I'm not a public speaker.
Yeah.
I mean, technically, I guess I am now a professional speaker, but I never intended to be, or, I don't have a clicker or anything. But like, people will come to me and say, you're the most powerful speaker I've ever seen. And really all I'm doing is just standing up there being vulnerable. Right. And I think that when we think about vulnerability, we think about it as being negative, right? Vulnerability is the door to rejection and pain and all of these bad things. And it means I'm weak and all these things. But what I've learned is that vulnerability is the door to love and acceptance and self-love and compassion and purpose and power and like all these things. And so I wish that we would think about vulnerability in a different way.
Well, I think you ran from vulnerability for your whole life until you made that decision to stand there and tell that story. And I wonder if 1998 had never happened, I wonder where you would be today. I wonder if you would have ever faced it.
I don't know. And you're probably right. I may not have. I may have continued to run from things. And today people ask me, if you could go back and change it, would you? Today I say no, I wouldn't.
Right.
That's hard. That's a hard place to get to. But I would not go back and change anything about my life or that gang rape, because I think that is part of who I am.
Yeah.
I am not what happened to me, but it has shaped me to be who I am, and it has placed me on this journey. Yeah. And I couldn't do the work I do today if that had not happened to me. I wouldn't be talking to you.
No, and you wouldn't be changing lives and giving people hope. So you go and you talk with that coach, which is unbelievable, right? You talk to his team, and then you're invited to other college teams. And all of a sudden now this snowball effect starts happening over time. Talk about what that looked like in that experience, because now at some point we're on ESPN, and that didn't happen overnight. So talk about that. That's amazing.
Yeah, no, that's crazy. So with the speaking part of my story, and I'm also a citizen lobbyist. So I also have helped change laws here in my state. And that's kind of the first thing I started doing, was helping to change laws. But with the speaking part of it, I went to Nebraska to have that moment with that coach, right? I needed healing in that moment. And I shared my story, and then another school called, and I thought, well, okay, I'll do it again.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And then another school called, I was like, okay, I'm gonna do it again.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then they just haven't stopped calling. Well, COVID, things are slow right now.
Right.
But, I've been to at least 90 campuses at this point.
Oh
But early on, I will tell you that early on after coming forward with my story, I recognized immediately that this sexual violence is not a women's issue.
yeah.
But we talk about it as a women's issue. But I understood immediately that if women alone could stop sexual violence, we would have already done it.
That's right.
Men are the missing component to this issue.
Right.
And it's not the men that are committing these crimes, but the men who are not committing these crimes.
Mm.
Because, and I want you to listen to closely what I'm about to say. Most sexual violence is committed by men, but most men do not commit sexual violence.
Wow.
So it's about 10% of our male population who are committing these crimes, which means 90% of our men are not.
Right.
Good guys, right? But for a lot of men, it's kind of like, well, why is this my issue, right? Isn't that a women's issue? Isn't that a Me Too thing? Well, it's the good man's issue because number one, if women can't do the work alone, we've already tried, right?
We've tried.
Yep. We can't. Yep. We've proven that we can't do it ourselves.
Right.
The 10% aren't going to help us, right? So who does that leave? That leaves men. So the problem is that within the 90% of good men who don't commit these crimes, we have men who are complicit in their silence, they're complicit in their inaction. They just don't think it's their issue. And what I do is I go in our room and I explain to them why this is specifically your issue. And I need you to align yourself with me and other women and organizations and groups to push. The 90% of all of us need to push back on the 10% who are doing these things. We need to change laws. We need to hold people accountable. We need to understand that it doesn't have to happen to your family member for you to care either,
yes.
Right? And as long as we only care about our family members, nobody is safe. You know, my sons think I deserve safety and respect, but they need you to think I deserve safety and respect.
That's right.
They need them next to them to understand that it's not just your sister that matters, but what about that guy's sister? What about that person's mother? What about, and then, let's talk about male survivors too, all these things. So I pretty much went out there in the world and decided that, I'm going to engage all of the good men. I'm going to talk to the 90%, and I'm going to talk about men as the solution and not just the problem.
That's so
awesome.
Say
to you that you're the problem, yes, but you're also the solution.
Yeah.
And so that's what I do. I go out and I try to engage the masses. And I mostly work in sports. I work with men in sports because, how do you
there's a culture.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and there's a culture there. But is that where the hashtag set the expectation? Is that talk about what that hashtag means?
So the campaign hashtag set the expectation, and now my nonprofit set the expectation, started in 2017. So when I started traveling the country to these really big football programs, I recognized early on that there were coaches standing in front of the room saying, your behavior matters, and if you harm someone, you don't get to play sports for me.
Yeah.
Because what a lot of people don't know is that in the NCAA, rape is not a violation. It does not keep you from playing sports. Like, you can be criminally convicted in a court of law and the NCAA will let you play and receive a scholarship. You can't accept money or anything else, but you can commit rape.
That needs to change.
Yeah, I'm working on it.
Yeah, I knew you were.
Yeah, I'm an activist in that space too.
Yeah.
But what I recognized was that these leaders that are building these young men were not having these important conversations. Some were, some weren't. And so I thought, how do I get all these coaches on the same page to draw the line in the sand with these players? And I thought, what I really want them to do, and what I really wanted them to do was just set the expectation that sexual assault and physical violence are never okay. And I wanted them to attach their eligibility to their behavior the same way that we do with grades. So I started the campaign, Set the Expectation. It started with a little pledge. And we had a purple and teal ribbon that represents sexual assault and domestic violence. And then that campaign just organically turned into awareness raising games. And then it turned into a nonprofit. And now I'm working on a learning platform. And it's just morphed into a movement, really, of men setting the expectation.
Brenda, this is amazing.
It's been really cool.
Yeah, it's very cool. And is the Tracy Rule, is that connected to that? I was reading about that. Tell us about that.
Yeah. So the Set the Expectation pledge it's not a binding contract, but the coach hands it to their players and staff and says, if you commit these behaviors, then you're out of here.
Right.
And everybody signs. The Tracy Rule is actually just an actual policy.
Okay.
And so because the NCAA doesn't have a policy, I was like, well, then fine, I'll make one.
Yeah, exactly. Because that's what you do.
I can go from school to school to school and tell them you need to have a policy. And so University of Texas San Antonio was the very first school to implement the Tracy Rule, but it is the most comprehensive serious misconduct policy in the country. And it makes rape, domestic violence, stalking, those kinds of things a violation, and you can lose your eligibility to play sports.
You know, what I find so moving about you, on the one hand, sharing your story and being vulnerable to help other women who have had similar experiences, but also the fact that you're literally stopping. We don't even know, we'll never know how many rapes you prevented, how many assaults you prevented just by doing what you're doing. That makes me want to just, like, that gives me the chills, that right there. If we had more people being willing, like you are, to tell your story, to be powerful, to be strong, to face it, to face your fears, really to help other people, to free other people. And I know in that process, you have been freed, right? In that process, you have been healed. But the very fact that you are preventing further pain is, I'm not really sure what better purpose there can be.
Well, I mean, that's always the hope, right?
That's the hope.
I look at, you know, the way as a society we're so reactionary, and working in healthcare, I saw that a lot. We react to the sick patient coming in, but we don't do as much prevention.
Right.
And for me, a lot of it's just about, what if we could just prevent it from even happening?
Exactly.
What if we could just save that life or that child, or, you know, whoever it is? And really, these are issues of humanity. When we talk about violence and we talk about sexual assault and all these things, you know, no one is immune.
No.
It doesn't matter your education.
Nope.
It doesn't matter your race, religion, your age. Anyone can be the victim of sexual violence. And really, anybody can be a perpetrator too.
That's another point that I think is important. As the mother of three teenage boys, and, you know, we raise our children and we put values into them and character, but if this is not an issue that has touched us, we may not discuss it. We may not. And so what are we missing? What opportunity are we missing to tell them, hey, this is a real issue at that teenage age, you know, at the hormone stage? You know, to me, that story, that issue, that language, all of that needs to be discussed in the household, because I want these men to be men who protect women.
Yeah, well, and it's not even just about protecting women, because we don't need a bunch of bouncers, right?
No,
like, women are strong and whatever. But it is also about, you know, holding people accountable, right? Like, when I am in a room full of guys, I'll say to them, all of you know which guy you wouldn't want to date your sister. And they all laugh. Yeah. They think it's funny. And I'm like, why is that okay? Why do you know that guy is like that? So true. But it's okay, and we don't say anything. Oh, he's just like that, or whatever. That's not okay. And why are we silent in moments of injustice, right? I think
that's scary. That's the scary part, is the silence. That's where when I say protection, I think what I really mean is that you're speaking up, that you're seeing something at a party and you're saying that's not okay, right?
Yeah. And a lot of people, you know, what I talk about in my story is not just what happened to me, but, you know, I came forward with my story. I went to the police, I got a rape kit done, all that stuff. I found out 16 years later that the DA at the time told me I didn't have a good case. But I found out 16 years later that they had taped confessions from all four men. I found out 16 years later that my rape kit wasn't tested and thrown in the trash before the statute of limitations was even up. I had reported to the school. I found out that the university president told people not to talk about me. So there was a whole, like, you know, kind of a cover-up thing going on with my story. And so all these good people who were supposed to protect me and supposed to help me didn't.
That's right.
And that betrayal, I talked to people about that betrayal hurt the most, right? And I would talk about, you know, the coach that gave him a 1-game suspension. He was supposed to be a man that was supposed to be building good men, right?
That's right.
And then you give a 1-game suspension. I directly correlated that suspension to the worth of my life.
Oh, wow, Brenda.
What I was worth, right? And I think we do that. And I think that it's the good people who do nothing and say nothing. That's why these things continue to happen.
Right. It's a whole system.
We're silent. Yes. It will continue to happen.
Yes. And so so you're trying to even change the system, really, to get that sensitivity to, we all have to be a part of this. We all, you know, all of those layers in the university, they all have to react the right way. Your statute of limitations expired. So you were never able to do anything with
Right.
this situation.
Right.
Have you had any interaction with the men that did this to you since, and what's happened with that?
No, I haven't. They were named, their photos and names were in my original story, because it's public record. I think maybe there were some anonymous accounts that trolled me for a little bit, but no, none of them have really reached out to me. The reporter I worked with tried to get comment from all of them. They all just kind of, hunkered down.
Yeah.
They've never
Yeah.
said anything.
Yeah.
They know they got away with it.
Right.
And you're right. The statute of limitations had passed on my case, so there's never anything I can do about it. But I changed the statute of limitations so someone else can.
Yeah. See,
So
that's amazing.
I really tried very hard to make sure that the injustices that I endured don't happen to someone else.
Yeah.
And I think as you and I are talking right now, when we hear things like silence is violence, that's what people mean.
Yeah.
They mean that, for instance, Larry Nasser at Michigan, he wasn't in a vacuum. He didn't do that by himself. He
Everybody
had people around him.
Yeah.
He had people around him that supported him, good people that created that environment where he could thrive. And predators hunt where they're safe. Yep. And we have to make sure that we create communities where predators are not safe and they're held accountable, and we believe people, and we do our due diligence, and we have laws and all of these things. Because in any moment of injustice, if we do nothing and we say nothing, are we good people? Right? Because doing nothing is doing something, and saying nothing is saying something.
That's right. It is. So what would you say to the woman watching right now that's been through some of this, all of it, a bit of it, somebody who's just racked with shame, guilt, fear, who doesn't know how to face this, how to move forward? Her story may be different than yours, and maybe she doesn't have the opportunity to have a platform. Maybe that's not part of where she's supposed to go in life. But what would you say to her right now who's watching, who feels stuck, and it's affected every area of her life? How does she break through that fear and that shame?
Well, I think to anyone watching this, no matter who you are, your age, man, woman, however you choose to identify as a human, I think number one, I'm sorry for what happened to you. You didn't deserve that. And I think that one of the most important things for me that I needed to accept was that I did nothing wrong, and this was not my fault, and that I deserve to be believed and supported and taken care of. And it's hard. It's hard to get to the point where you understand that I did nothing wrong. But the truth is, I cannot force another person to make a decision to use their body to violate mine.
That's right. And
no one deserves that. No one puts themselves in that position. And so for anyone that's watching this as blaming themselves, I need you to stop. I need you to have a conversation with yourself. And one of the things that I do, a little exercise that I do, is should rape be a consequence of, and then you fill in the blank. So whatever it is that you're blaming yourself about, I went to that apartment, I drank. Well, should rape be a consequence of drinking? Should rape be a consequence of going to that party? Should rape be a consequence of anything? You can't fill in the blank to make it make sense.
Nope, you can't.
And you have to just start telling yourself the truth, because your trauma and shame and fear will lie to you at all costs. They will tell you crazy things. They will lie to you. And you have to talk back to that fear and shame and say no. And you just have to keep doing it. And you have to keep on doing it. And you have to be intentional. And I still to this day do it. Yeah. And trauma doesn't just go away. You have to face it and you have to deal with it. But you can. Because I also want these survivors to know that survivors are some of the strongest people on the planet. Agreed. I thought that I was weak and broken, but I'm not. I'm a badass. I'm pretty strong. I've survived a lot. You are. Today, I rejoice in that. I rejoice in the strength it took for me to survive. It doesn't take a lot of strength to survive nothing. That's right. Absolutely. Right? Amen to that. And so I need every survivor out there watching this that hears me know that you are strong. You're way stronger than you think or know. Amen. And you're just as strong as me. Because I get a lot of people like, I'm not as strong as you. I'm like, yes, you do. You are. You just don't know it yet. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it is amazing. And I get inspired by watching that, what your choices you've made, because I know everyone has the ability. It's a choice.
It's a choice every day what you do with those emotions, with those feelings, with those fears. It's a choice every day how you want to push forward. It's not easy. Some days are better than others, but it's choice. And we have that choice. We do. That is the one thing we have control over. So what's next for you? Because I mean, so many people have been changed by your story. You've been on ESPN multiple times, right? You've had exposure now. I think you've been in the NFL as well, not just college.
Yeah, I worked with the Ravens team recently, and then probably will be doing more work. I have a lot of my college football players that are now in the NFL, and so we have like our first Set the Expectation NFL ambassador.
Nice.
He's on the Washington D.C. team that's going to be changing their name.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, it's kind of just, whether the NFL wants me or not, it's happening, right? Because I'm working with all these high school and college players that are going to end up in the NFL anyway. So whether you want me or not, I'm coming.
I'm coming. Brenda's coming. Look out. That's amazing. I think it's great. So I want people to know how they can get more information from you, to watch what you're doing. Kind of give us like social media, website, all that stuff.
Yeah, so my handles on Twitter and on Instagram are Brenda Tracy 24. My last name is spelled Tracy, no E.
Yeah.
And then settheexpectation.org. If you want to go to the website and see how you can get involved. Set the Expectation is a campaign that anyone can get involved in. Obviously, we focus on sports and men, but we have people who host like musical concerts that benefit the local domestic violence shelter in their area. We do donation drives. We do lots of events and things, and we encourage people to get creative. I think this is about celebrating survivors and raising awareness and giving back and, doing all of the good things we can. This doesn't have to be a subject full of stigma.
No,
right.
Agreed. Right.
And I don't want people hiding in shame and silence anymore. I think we need to start uplifting the strength and the courage of survivors and figure out what do we need to do to make sure that this doesn't happen to anyone else.
Yep. Bring it out of the darkness. So here's the big question. When's the book coming out?
I'm actually working on one right now.
I had a feeling.
So it's been a process. I mean, I originally had someone approach me right as soon as I came forward with my story.
Yeah.
And I was just kind of like, my life's not that exciting and I don't know if I want to do it. And so I've kind of grappled with it over the years because I kind of felt like the book was still writing itself. But I think I'm pretty close at this point about like what I want it to be and what I want it to look like.
Yeah.
And so we're working on it right now. It's hard. It's hard to kind of delve into all that traumatic stuff of my life.
Sure.
And, I want the timing to be right. I believe in timing.
I do too.
Sometimes you can't push things. I think sometimes the puzzle pieces come together. And
you'll know when it's right.
Yeah. And so I think people have to be patient also, right? Our dreams don't always happen on our time.
No, that is the truth. And you know what? We don't want them to anyway, because somebody knows better than us. And at the end of the day, I really don't want to be the one in charge because I don't have all the best decisions, right?
Yeah.
Somebody else does, and I'm going to let him do that to the best of my ability. So
exactly.
Well,
so I'm working on it.
Yeah, well, good, because I mean, I think within that, it's not just a story, but it's tools and truth to give to people, to tell themselves the truth about themselves, to give them tools to overcome these things. And that's really a legacy that you leave. So I just want to thank you so much. I'm so honored that you're part of this. And I know that we're going to change some lives just through this conversation.
Oh, thank you.
And so I just give you a big virtual COVID hug and, right. So thank you so much. And when you get closer to a book or whatever that looks like, when the season is right, let's talk again, because I'd love to dive into that with you.
Oh, I would love that. Thank you so much. And I just am really thank you. Thank you for having me on. It's really feels empowering for me to be able to talk about the journey after, because I think that's for a lot of people, like you shared your story, but now what?
Now what?
What happens after that?
Yep. Well, there's a lot still to happen for you, Brenda. So God bless.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming on. We'll talk to you soon.